Once a year, we stage a pop-up record store at a really cool local festival. It is a ton of work, but it's always worth it in the end. We'll walk you through everything that goes into putting it on this episode, talking about records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record stores in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop online anytime at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you'd subscribe here to our YouTube channel and follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl is the handle on Facebook and Instagram. Let's talk about pop-up record stores. What does that even mean? Well, it's just a fancy way of saying, hey, we set up and sell some records at an event, right? But it's a lot more than that, believe me. First and foremost, let me preface this by telling you about the specific event because I don't think it's that unique, but I think the idea of selling records at any event, a lot of the success or failure of that is going to be contingent on the event itself, right? So the event that we do once a year, and I stress that we only do it once a year, and you'll know why once I tell you what all goes into it, right? It's called the Switchyard Festival. It is in the Dallas area in a suburb called Carrollton, actually where I grew up. They do it once a year every November. And it's a great festival. A, it's free. That's a very key component. We'll talk about that. B, it is very well attended. They estimate 40,000 people come throughout the day. C, it is very based in music. There's lots of really good bands. They actually book national bands. They have cover bands, but it's always a really good lineup. So it's got a lot going for it, and a lot of the vibe of the festival aligns really nicely with records, right? And that's very, very important. I don't think it's completely unique. There's lots of cities that have craft fairs, free music festivals, those types of things. It's one of those. There's lots of food trucks, there's lots of crafts, arts and crafts booths, there's tons of games and rides and things like that. Again, all free, which is very, very important. There's no admission to get in. That's a key component to this. So if you've got an event if you've got an event like that happens in your area, then you could potentially look at doing something like this if you have records to sell, right? But I will warn you, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm just going to tell you how we do it as NTX Vinyl, which has evolved over years. We just did this for the 4th year in a row. So, every year we evolve what we do, how many records we bring, how we promote it, all those different types of things, right? So first and foremost, what does it cost, right? So I can only speak to this specific event, but I'm sure most of them are kind of similar. I don't think any of these are completely unique, like I've mentioned. But essentially, you buy a booth or you buy a tent, you rent that space. That will typically cost you a couple $100 for the day. In this case, in this festival, it is a one-day festival. Now, that's important. There are other festivals in our area, actually, that I've considered doing, and they're like 3-day festivals where it's a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. So your cost is a little more, but even more so than that, it's a lot of time invested. 3 days is a lot to be standing around talking to people, even if you've got a staff and rolling, and it's just a ton of workload. Believe me, it's a ton of workload even just for one day to do it. But so you rent one of these booths, and that's really your only monetary expense. Your hard cost is the couple $100 it's going to cost to get that space at the festival, which again, it doesn't matter if you're selling, paintings or if you're selling jewelry or records, right? You pay the same amount. It's a little different if you're a food vendor. There's some different things in regards to making sure you get approved to sell food. But as far as selling records or selling arts or crafts or anything like that, homemade Etsy type style stuff, anybody can do that, like for the most part. The other expense, I think, definitely is advertising. even though the event has good foot traffic, we always advertise a little bit leading up to the event to make sure our customers who are local know we're going to be there. So that's very important. Beyond that, inventory. It's going to come down to inventory. How many records do you want to bring? So we typically will get 2 booths at this festival. They are 10 by 10 tents. So essentially we have a 10 by 20 because we are to 10 by 20. And our goal always is to bring somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 records, which for us ends up being about 30 to 35 crates of records. That's how we have kind of learned the sweet spot of what's going to fill up that space, right? You don't want so many records and it's too crowded, people can't get in, but you also, people can't walk in, but you also don't want, just a couple crates, because then it doesn't look enticing and people aren't even going to come in and like, oh, there's only a few hundred records, So we've kind of found that sweet spot about what fits as far as how much inventory. The hard part is, okay, as far as records are concerned, you've got couple different routes to go, but mainly you've got pre-owned records and you've got new records. Now, if you're a record shop and you're selling new records, you've got those options, which we do. Honestly, new records is a lot easier because, I can order new records all day long. I can go cherry pick exactly which artist I want and I can order them and I can bring them to the festival. But new records aren't cheap. They're not cheap for you and they're not cheap for me. If I'm selling a record for $25, at a local festival, well, it's costing me 15, 16, 17 bucks up front. That's one record. Remember, our goal is to bring 2,500. So you can imagine what that costs. So stocking 2,500 new records for that day, that would be a massive upfront cost. And for us, that's not the route we go. We typically split it about 50-50 or maybe even 60-40 on the pre-owned record side. Because pre-owned records, you can buy larger collections if you're a shop or individual if you figure out how to do it. And then you're not out so much money up front because pre-owned records you can usually buy for pennies or dollars, several dollars each, right? Because you buy in bulk. That's how reselling works if you're a record shop. Now, you buy pre-owned records, great, you got them a lot cheaper, but now they got to be organized, they got to be sorted, they got to be cleaned, they have to be graded, they have to be sleeved, they have to be priced. One record, you have to go through that process for every single record. So, okay, so the pre-owned records aren't costing me as much monetarily, but they cost a lot more when it comes to time. So for this specific event, we usually start about 6 months out because that's how long it takes to price 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,500 used records. That is a massive amount of time invested. Now, keep in mind, if this is your only thing that you're doing, well, maybe it wouldn't take you near as long, but we have multiple locations. We do multiple online sales every week. So we have a lot of inventory we're acquiring for other reasons in addition to this festival. So that's why we give it such a big lead time, because I know if I wait till, 60 days out from this festival and then decide, all right, time to start getting our inventory together, like I'll never make it in time, right? So we usually start 6 months in advance, setting aside records specifically for this event, cleaning, grading, pricing them, and then keeping them in boxes until the event, right? So 6 months out, we start acquiring pre-owned records and getting those priced, usually a couple crates per month leading up. And then same with the new records. Instead of having to front a huge bill right before the event for a bunch of new inventory, we usually will start adding to our weekly and monthly orders of records for our shops and for other sales. And we start kind of padding those and setting records aside, new vinyl, at the same time. So you've got used records being priced, you've got new records being set aside for 6 months, so that by the time the event actually happens, you've got the bulk of your inventory there and waiting versus having to scramble at the last minute and spend a whole bunch of money or spend a whole bunch of time, right? So inventory is obviously critical. I don't care if you're what kind of business you're in, if it's retail oriented, it all comes down to your inventory. Now, for this specific festival, again, I mentioned it's very music focused. They actually, the city of Carrollton, where it's at, does an amazing job booking real headliners. So this past year was Collective Soul and Fuel. They've had Soul Asylum. They've had Toadies. They've had Stone Temple Pilots. They have all really good bands. And for our crowd, for NTX Vinyl, for our customer base, it fits in perfect because it's like very much a throwback, kind of a nostalgia based festival where they don't book a ton of like new upcoming bands no one's heard of. They book pretty established, somewhat national level bands who are coming through and touring. And then they also book a bunch of cover bands. So there'll be a Beatles cover band this past year. There was a Journey cover band. So all kinds of stuff like that, which is cool too. The demo is very much in NTX Vinyl's wheelhouse too. It's mostly, again, as a generalization, I would say families. You know, you got families and adults who are 35 to 55, you know, so again, with actual money potential to maybe already be collecting records. We get a ton of people who walk through and are just like, oh my God, this is so cool. I didn't know records were back, you know, that type of thing. No different than people who walk into or see a record store, they're driving by. So inventory is great. And critical, and has to align with kind of the vibe of the festival. You know, if it's a festival that doesn't have live music, so you're not going to get a lot of people there coming for that. You know, I don't know if that'd be as good of a fit if it's just a traditional arts and crafts festival. Probably could. I mean, records kind of fit into any model, if you will. But so inventory, market fit, those are key. I talked about upfront cost. Let's talk about promotion. I did talk about advertising. Obviously, leading up to the festival. I usually don't start, you know, a couple weeks out. Like there's no point in advertising a festival 3 months in advance. People don't know what they're doing on a Saturday 3 months from now. Like they maybe will put it on their calendar, but the reality is, you know, you want to start a couple weeks out. And I basically start taking inventory that is already priced and already ready and is going to be dedicated to the festival and start teasing it. So, you know, what pre-owned records are cool that will entice our customers to come to the event, right? What new records do we have? What does the inventory look like? And why is it unique from our local shops? In some cases, there's a lot of crossover, but the reality is when we set things aside, especially on the pre-owned side, it's all unique that day because, you know, our local shops aren't going to have the exact same records that we have at that event that day. So it's very much kind of a destination, again, one day a year. So pricing and getting all the inventory set up, aligning that with how you start advertising and how you start promoting in a couple weeks out, that's all very important. Staffing is big. There's no way I could do this on my own. I have a team of really of just friends who I've hired to help me for scenarios like this. So I, you know, have people who are helping me price the records, helping me curate their new records of what I'm going to stock over time that's going to align with the event. Obviously helping me just spread the word in general on social media about the event. And then that day is huge. So again, I mentioned 40,000 people come through this event, you know, rolling throughout the day. The event's 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. So it's a 12-hour day, 40,000 people. There's no way I'm doing that on my own. So I typically will have, if I think back to this this most recent one, I had 3 people working with me dedicated throughout the day. And then I probably had another 3 or 4 kind of just friends and family kind of helping out. The biggest thing is obviously someone, you know, always manning you know, the checkout to be able to check people out. But you've got a lot of people asking questions about, hey, do you have this? Hey, I looked at the condition on this. Hey, why is this priced this way? And then, you know, again, a lot of foot traffic. So you got to have eyes on your inventory and make sure people are just not walking off with stuff. So that's a big part of it too. So I usually will have someone dedicated to obviously checking people out. And then I'll have 2 or 3 people, myself included, who are literally just standing around watching for the entire day. But you got to have breaks. You got to people to take breaks. You're standing all day. So you want to have as much help as possible. Luckily, I've got an incredible community of coworkers and friends and family who all kind of just come and hang and make a tailgate out of it. Luckily, we typically have really good weather in Texas in November, so that makes for a great day. And so, yeah, so staffing is big. You got to have help. But that's for us. We're doing a 10 by 20 booth with 2,500 records. So there's a lot going on. If you start smaller, you get a single booth. maybe it's a 10 by 10 tent, and you've got a couple hundred records, you can probably do it on your own. Maybe have a backup just so you have breaks throughout the day. But it really depends on what the scenario is, what the event's like, and how much foot traffic there is. Again, I mentioned that in this specific festival, it's free and they get 40,000 people through. That's very key. There's a lot of festivals where, well, in music festivals specifically, that there's an admission. I've never done one of those because it would deter my customers, right? If they have to buy a ticket for $40 to get into this festival for the whole weekend just to come shop at my little pop-up store. Like, I don't know. It would still work if there's a lot of great foot traffic though, honestly, because especially if it's music oriented, it would just be a barrier to entry if you have like a customer base like me. But if you're just a reseller and you've got great inventory, you're looking to move, like that could definitely be a great outlet, regardless if it's a free festival or not. So inventory, promotion and advertising, setup. Let's talk about setup. So how do you stage it? Well, I've got a ton of folding tables. The event actually staffs each, or they provide each of the booths with one or two tables and a couple chairs. We have to usually bring multiple more, so we end up with, I think, about 8 to 10 tables that kind of line the booth. Everything's in crates already alphabetized, so the day or two leading up to the festival is crazy because there's 2,500 records and they all have to be organized and alphabetized. We do that beforehand. We don't have to. I choose to. But believe me, when someone comes up and they say, hey, do you have any Eagles? It's a lot better for me to go, oh, they're right over here in the pre-owned section. Just look under the E, in the alphabet, versus going, oh, I don't know, you got to dig through 1,000 records to good luck. Like, I'm never going to make a sale that way. People are walking through. They want to experience the whole festival. They don't have time to come in and sit for an hour and dig through 1,000 records to look for something. So accessibility is really, really important. So we get everything alphabetized beforehand. We actually cover all the tables with like cheap tablecloths, make it look kind of nice versus just having a bunch of random tables. That's just me being OCD and having some sort of presentation. I have signage for our brand for NTX Vinyl, which is important because I do have a brand, and so I always want to promote that. We built some custom display boards. I'll show pictures of all this stuff. I went to Lowe's and bought like peg boards that typically go behind like a workbench, and we fashioned some shelves or some ledges, I should say, to display albums. That way when people are walking by, they actually see albums. So otherwise, I can tell you, even though it says NTX Vinyl on the sign, a lot of people don't, they don't know what that is. And they just see a lot of people in the booth, and it looks really crowded because it can get crowded. And they're like, I don't want to go in there. But if you see a bunch of eye candy on the back, and it's a bunch of records that and you're like, oh man, I love those albums. I love that album. Like you might entice people to come in. So really the display boards is all about eye candy to try and get people to understand that there's records in here so they can come in and dig through them. The number of people that come through and just have a flashback is always awesome. Like that's one of my favorite things, is watching people walk by and be like, man, look at all those people shopping for records. Or you'll get people who come in and their kids run in, teenagers or even younger, to look at records, which is always awesome to see as well. Again, this specific event is very family friendly. There's tons of rides and games and arts and crafts and face painting, and again, a lot of the cover bands, some of them are geared toward children as well, and the local schools get involved. So it's a great community event, and it always is a huge success for us. I say all of that basically to preface, like, hey, it's a ton of work. Like, it's not the type of thing where we just pay the admission fee and get it together the week of and go down and pop and throw the records out on some table and hope people buy them. Like, that's not how it rolls with anything. Typically, whatever you invest in regards to your time and your energy and your money, like, that's what you're going to get back out of it. It's always a really successful event for us, otherwise we wouldn't keep doing it, obviously. But again, it's one event a year. Like, there's no way I would do it every month. Oh my god, the amount of work. Records are heavy. Like, they're heavy, they're fragile, they take up so much space. Having to load them in and out of trucks to get them back to our storage units or our shops or wherever they may be, like, there's a significant investment there from a time perspective. So we pinpoint this one event. It's centrally located to our area, which is great because we have shops kind of throughout the area. So it makes sense for us to be there to promote our local shops as well as our online presence to all these people who at least have a chance to then maybe become customers. Like that's a big part of it for us. Um, and the other big part about it too, I think, and this would be the same for a lot of festivals, in any area, and people ask me this all the time. Well, they're like, well, why do you do this? Why don't you do the record shows? There's multiple record shows in Dallas, and I do participate in those and sometimes. But the reality is when you go to a record show, you're one vendor and you've got a table or two, and then there's 49 other vendors or 99 other vendors, and they've all got records too. So it's awesome for the record buyer because they get to come and they've got pick of the litter. They can stick around for hours and look through thousands upon thousands of records, and they can pick out whatever they want based on price, based on their want list and all those things. That's awesome. But for a seller, you're competing with 49 or 99 or however many other vendors are there. Now you don't have the exact same inventory, but there's a lot of crossover in inventory. There's not that many records, and if you're selling especially new inventory, things like that, so it's very competitive at record shows. These types of events I'm talking about are the complete opposite. In most cases, you're the only person there selling records. The booths next to us are selling, handcrafted, frames and candles, and then this person's selling clothing, and then you got tons of food booths selling, all kinds of different stuff out of food trucks and things. So you're unique. You're the only person there offering vinyl records. So that's really, really important to stand out, and that's why I like these types of festivals, because again, you're not competing with every other person there. You're competing for people's dollars still, because people don't come and spend money at every single booth. Of course, it's a lot of window shopping, a lot of people just there kind of enjoying the day and the free live music and that, of course. But yeah, being able to stand out from all the other booths because you're selling something unique, that's very, very important, and it's key to these types of events. So it's an awesome event. I look forward to it every year, as does our team. It's a way to get out and do something different, which is really, really cool. So would love your feedback. If you have any questions, if you've ever done anything like this at a local festival, I'd love to hear what you've had success with or what you've struggled with. This could definitely be in line with the video series we did, How to Open a Record Store. This is a part of it, doing events, getting out in the community. I think that's a big part of owning a business, and a big part of owning a record store is doing types of things like this. In addition to record shows, these types of events can be really, really cool. So I definitely would encourage you to look into it, check it out, or let me know if you've seen other record shops doing this in your local community at local events. I would love to hear what that experience has been like. So there you go. That's my story about our once a year pop-up record store. Hopefully that's been entertaining. My name is G.I. Sanders. As always, this has been another episode of Talking About Records. We will talk to you again soon.